Hello and welcome to the very first exam mastery course. This is specifically for the AQA exam. Today we're going to be going through the beliefs and practices exam, looking at the different question types and all those sorts of things. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the structure and types of questions in the GCSE exam, understand what the actual assessment objectives are and their application into how the questions are marked, which is crucial for being able to answer brilliant questions. And then finally apply our knowledge then and effective strategies to try and answer difficult question types, including 1 markers, 4 markers, 6 markers, and 12 mark questions. We're not going to have a go at answering those in this session today. What we're going to look at is exactly how we can apply all of this knowledge that we've looked at so far in this session into our practice at home. So the different exam types I'm going to just leave up here on the slide so you guys can copy them down if you are not sure. Now, for those of you who are watching this video as it comes out, this is going to be the first exam with these question types. If you're watching this years down the line, then obviously you should be used to these questions by now. This is the new layout for the exam. You have 2 1-mark questions. One of them is multiple choice. One of them is more of a short response, which gives you an opportunity to demonstrate some sort of knowledge of a religious teaching or a belief. That could be like a key word or something like that. You have your 4-mark question, you have your 6-mark question, and finally then your 12-mark question. Those are the different exam question types. Now it's important to know that you will have 4 of these per paper that you do. So in the beliefs, teachings and practices paper, you'll have 4 of these on one religion for their beliefs and teachings, 1 for their practices, and then the same again, because in this first paper, you will talk about 2 different religions. You will look at both their beliefs and teachings and their practices. So in total, you'll do these 5 questions 4 times for a total of 20 questions in your exam. Now, it's really, really important to understand the command words that are used in the exam questions. The reason I say this is because the exam boards love to write questions in a way where it's not always so straightforward to understand exactly what it is that they mean. So the first one, explain, the simplest of them all, but still sometimes can be misleading. It's just to provide reasons or causes. So once you've given a belief, well, why is it that belief exists, or what does this cause? That's what you want to do when you are explaining any point that you give. In the exam, especially in the 12-mark questions, you're going to need to evaluate. This includes presenting arguments for and against and reaching a conclusion. That means you need to be able to weigh up both sides of the argument, showing their strengths and their weaknesses. Now, one of the questions that can come up in the exam can be an influence question. Now, we're going to have a look at exactly how we answer this sort of question in just a minute. It's good to know that it's basically just describing how a belief in something can have an impact on an individual. So, for example, belief in hell might make a Christian behave better because, well, they're fearful of going to hell. Influence is another crucial one. Now, I've put different in here, and that's because as a new change in the exam board, but also because it's still a little bit misleading. It just says different, which many people think that should mean sort of opposite. These do not have to be opposite. So say, for example, you could say, or traditional Christians believe one thing, whereas other Christians believe another. You can have differing beliefs within the same religion. As long as they answer the same argument, different just means different. They don't have to be opposite. They could be arguing for the same thing. They just have to be different arguments and different reasons for the arguments being proposed. Now, it's really important in your answer that whenever you're doing all of this exam question stuff, that you are referring to your specific religion that you have studied when answering. Make sure that when you're reading out the questions, in them, it will have the religious aim in there. Use the wording of the question to help you answer your question. So when you're looking for these key command words, also just underline what religion it is that you are answering, because what can commonly happen is you'll be in the Islam paper, for example, if you're studying Islam, that is, and then you'll write about Christians. It's really easy to forget when you start writing about one religion that you're then moving on to a different one. And when you're in the flow of writing, putting down a different religious name is very common. So just underlining the religious name in the question and using it in your sentence starter, make sure then that you're going to get full marks. So how is it actually all marked? Now, the first thing that examiners look for is your AO1. This is your knowledge and understanding of the religion and the beliefs. So a lot of the 4 and 5 mark questions look for your AO1 knowledge, demonstrating your understanding. Whereas then when you get into the 12 mark questions, you also need then this AO2, this analysis and evaluative aspects of religion. So you have the points that you give will be your AO1, your explanations of them, the reasons that you give, and the evaluations that you give in your 4, 6, and 12 mark questions. Those are the ones that are going to have your AO2 marks in there. So knowing that this is what they're looking for in your answers means that for a 4 mark question, it's all well and good demonstrating knowledge, but if you don't analyse it and give an explanation, you're not going to get the full marks. In a 12 mark question, if you don't evaluate aspects of that religion, which include the significance or the influence that they have, you're not going to get full marks. Knowing that you need to be looking out for these key things is crucial for constructing your own argument. You can build your argument based around AO1 and AO2. So having this exam technique down is going to allow you to maximize the answers to fit exactly what the exam boards want. So making sure that in a 4 mark question, your point explain, point explain. For a 6 mark question, point evidence explain, point explain. Making sure then that you also give reference where the evidence come from. Having those set structures based around the AO1 and AO2 means that every answer that you write will be foolproof. You'll have the perfect way to answer any question. All you will have to do is change the content of the question, not the actual structure in itself. So, how to actually approach the exam. Don't do all the easy questions first. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, I did all the ones I'm confident with first, and I'll leave the ones that I'm not confident with at the end. The problem with this method, which is fine for some, the problem with it though, is that it means that throughout your exam, you're gradually getting worse and worse and worse in terms of your confidence, meaning that your confidence will be shattered by the time that you get to your most difficult question. All that confidence and momentum you built up with those really good answers that you gave earlier is now instantly gone. So what you should do instead is spread them out throughout the exam. All those questions that you think, yeah, I'm really confident with that one, do 2 or 3 of them at a time. But spread them out, dot them out. This way, on average, your confidence stays fairly level. So you have that consistency throughout the exam, which is going to help you in terms of your mental state when you're in there. One of the things about exams is that it can also be as much of a mental battle as it is a battle of time trying to get everything done. You will find it very easy to stress yourself out if you're starting to lose confidence. And the moment that confidence goes, thoughts come in of, well, I may as well give up. I'm going to fail this exam. And the moment those thoughts come in, you're instantly going to start to lose. So in order to win, you need to make sure you're keeping those thoughts positive, and you can do so by spreading out those confidence boosters throughout the exam. What we're going to do now is we're going to break down each exam question and a few little tips and tricks as to how to best answer these questions. So the first one is the 1 mark multiple choice question. So here's an example of what a question could look like. Which of the following is not part of the nature of God? This would be also in a Christianity paper, could be in the Islam paper as well. You could have omnipotent, omniscient, limited, and transcendent. In the exam, you will be given 4 options that you will need to choose from. Now, what happens if you don't recognise exactly which one the answer is? Well, use a process of elimination. Look for the words that you know first. Figure out, what do they mean? Once you know what they mean, does that fit the question? If the answer to that question is no, you can remove that option. So which of the following is not part of the nature of God? So the first one is omnipotent. What does that mean? That means God is all-powerful. Is that part of the nature of God? Yes. Does it fit the question? No, we can get rid of it. B, omniscient. And that means God is all-knowing. Is that part of the nature of God? Yes. Does it fit the question? No. We can get rid of it. And just by knowing two of those words, we've now made it a 50-50. And what I can then do is start using a little bit of my logic. Well, would people believe that God is limited? Well, no, probably not, because limited means that they have a cap. Their capabilities are limited. They can't do certain things. Therefore, that fits the question. There's the answer. This might take a little bit longer if you don't know any of the words. The most important thing is that you put an answer down, even if you don't know it. If you have a guess, you're guaranteeing yourself an opportunity of getting marks. If you leave it blank, you are guaranteeing yourself 0. So always make sure, especially for a question like this where you have options available to you, you take one of those options. It's worth a go, and it's only going to take you a matter of seconds. Now, looking at the 1 mark short responses, this is a fairly new exam question that's come in for the 2026 exam. So if you're doing it after that, you will have some pre-knowledge of this, but for some of you, this might be fairly new still. Now, a question could look like, name the belief in Jesus rising from the dead. So you have to do it in that situation and go, right, what is the key term that would link to that idea? This doesn't have to be a full sentence. Just use key term in itself. So therefore, the answer is the resurrection. That is all that you would have to put for this question in order to get the mark. Now, this should be then a really quick exercise and something that you should be able to have a go at, because even if you don't have the exact answer they're looking for, it might be that you can give an answer that is at least credit worthy. Because remember, although they have a strict mark scheme that they try to stick to, that they can't have every possible answer on there, meaning there might be moments where you can write something down that links to the idea and you could possibly still get the mark. So it's always worth a go, especially on these shorter questions that don't take all that much effort or time. Just writing down 2 words, very, very straightforward. Do try and make sure, though, again, you are answering all the questions that you possibly can. In order to be successful at these questions, one of the key things that I would recommend is just revising keywords and their definitions. If you can get those keywords and the definitions down, then you are going to be living the dream. Absolutely, you will be in this exam. Okay, it is crucial for your success to be able to use that tier 3 vocab, because if you do not use that in a 12-mark question, for example, later on down the line, there might be spelling, punctuation, and grammar marks available. If you do not use that high-level vocabulary, then you cannot get access to the full amount of marks available to you. And in this question, it's crucial because it can give you a really short, quick answer. That means you can get a whole load of questions done very, very quickly, saving you time for those big essay-style questions at the end. Now we come into the 4-mark question. Now these can be phrased in slightly different ways depending on where in the exam you are. Now, what you can sometimes get is explain 2 similar or different beliefs about. This can commonly come up in the practices section. You can get beliefs about a particular practice. It could be a way that you pray. Explain 2 similar beliefs about the importance of prayer, for example. In this situation, what you want to be looking at is use the wording of the question to start off with. So one similar belief about is, and then make sure that you are underlining the command words and the key parts of the question. If you do this, it just allows your mind to focus specifically on what the question is asking you. Because if you just look over the question once and instantly go to writing out an answer, sometimes you can forget what the question is actually looking for. Can you see if there is an idea of similar or different here? Because if you put 2 exact same beliefs, but the question is asking for different ones, then suddenly that's going to be significantly harder to get the full marks. The likelihood is you'll end up with 2 marks. If you are explaining, always start with the word this. You could go, this means that, this is because, this implies, this suggests, this is important. Whenever you use the word this, you automatically start giving that extra bit of detail, because the this is relating to the previous thing that has just been said. When you use the word this, you automatically start explaining. Too often I see people writing out answers where they've given either a point and explain and then a point with no second explanation, or just 2 points with no explanation. Starting your next sentence with this means you're automatically going to be giving that extra detail the exam board is looking for that AO2 knowledge. A really simple way of doing this can sometimes be using a keyword and a definition. So say, for example, a question was explained to similar Christian beliefs about baptism. You could say one Christian belief about baptism is infant baptism. This is where, and then explain that this is where babies are baptized to wash away the original sin. Another Christian belief about baptism is believer's baptism. This is where. And then you can explain how people can have the choice to go and get baptized in order to commit their lives to the religion. You could use keyword definition as a really, really simple way to answer those 4-mark questions, which is why, as I said earlier, looking at those keywords and their definitions as a quick sort of flashcard activity is a really useful thing to do. Following that structure then of point, explain, point, explain. You can also have influence questions. Now, this is more looking at things like the belief versus then the action that will happen. So one Christian belief in Jesus' resurrection, for example, influenced them to believe that he was more than just a human. This is because no other human being is capable of resurrecting themselves. This idea of here is the belief, this is what that belief causes. It's that belief and the cause, belief and the cause, belief and the action, belief and the action. Religious people are also still people. The reason I say this is because quite commonly people forget that actually Christians, Muslims, Jews, as much as they have religious rules to follow, they will still behave as anyone else would within modern society. They will still have very similar thoughts. They'll still do very similar things for similar reasons. So in a situation where you're not exactly sure how a particular belief is going to influence Christians or Muslims or Jews or Buddhists, whatever the religion might be, think about, well, what would normal people do in this situation? So say, for example, the question was the belief in predestination. You know what it is, but you can't think about how it would influence Muslims specifically. Think about how it would influence any person, any human being. If predestination in Islam, for example, where you believe that God knows and has decided all things, well, this means that for me, if God's decided everything's going to happen in my life, I don't have any choice. So there's where the influence comes in. So that belief then changes to, I suddenly have no free will. So remembering that at times, if you struggle to think of how something's going to influence, well, think about it on a generic basis. How would you feel if you believed in that thing? What's the first thing that comes to mind? That can get you out of that sort of rut when you get into those situations where you can't think of an answer off the bat. The 6-mark questions then, those of you who are doing the exam in 2026 and you may have done the previous 5-mark questions, this new question may have caused a bit of a stir for you. If you are doing this exam in 2027 or years on, this is something that hopefully you should be used to by now. Effectively, it is very similar to the old 5-mark questions in where it's going to ask you to explain 2 beliefs about something. And the structure for this is going to be almost identical to the structure that you would have used for a 5-mark question. Always think of your evidence first. If you can think of your evidence first that links to the question at hand, you can pull a point out of that bit of evidence. So say, for example, it was explained 2 beliefs about Jesus' crucifixion. You could think about the fact that it was a sacrifice to save the world. The quotation that you would have thought of first was, "For God so loved the world, he sent his only son to die." You've got that quotation. What can we pull out of it? That this was a loving act to save humanity. There's the point that we can pull out. We can then explain that in further detail. If you think of your evidence first, you can guarantee that your point is going to link. If you think of your point first, you can't guarantee that you're always going to find evidence to link to your specific point that you have made. Make sure that you reference where you have got the evidence from. If it's a quotation from the Bible, say, in the Bible it teaches, in the Bible it says. If it's from the Quran, do the same. The Torah, any of the religious texts, you need to make sure you reference it. This is where the 6th mark comes from, and this is why it is now different from the old 5-mark questions. You are gaining a mark saying where the quotation comes from. So don't miss out on an easy mark. Just make sure that you reference, say, in the Bible it says, in the Quran it says, whatever the name of the holy book is, it says. Add that before you include the quotation or the story that you're giving, and that way you can guarantee you're getting that mark in there. The extra thing that you need to do is explain how the evidence links to the points. Your explain needs to come after the evidence. Some people, in the form of 5-mark questions, would do point, explain, evidence. Problem with that is now there is an expectation for you to link the evidence back to the point, which means you need to follow the structure of point, evidence, explain. What you also need to remember as well is that stories can be used. You don't just have to use quotations. So if you can't think of one off the spot, but you can think of a story that is more general, you can use that as well. Said then the structure needs to be point, evidence with the reference, explain, point, explain. This way you can get 6 total marks. There's 6 things you're needing to do. Finally then, we get on to the 12-mark question. Now, this is usually some sort of statement of opinion, and then you need to evaluate this statement. This is your absolute best opportunity to demonstrate your AO1 and your AO2. In fact, AO2 is absolutely crucial if you want to get those 12 marks. Remember, this is an opinion-based question. As long as your information is accurate, there isn't really a right or wrong answer. Now, there might be some questions which will lean more one way than the other, but there are going to be some questions where you can argue either side is the best argument. It is crucial, though, that you say that one argument is more important than the other, because that's going to allow you to justify your conclusion and make sure you can have access to those full marks. What you also need to remember is that your opinion also doesn't matter in this case. The examiner isn't going to be judging you based on your opinion. They're not going to go, well, oh, they've answered this particular way, I disagree with that, so it's 0 marks. They don't care about the opinion that you are putting forward. So even if you disagree with the opinion, you can still argue it if it is easier to argue it that way. Now, the structure for this, you should try and do an introduction, especially if you know that you are someone who can go off on tangents. Writing an introduction just gives you that outline of what it is that you're going to be saying in your arguments, and it just allows you to focus your mind specifically on what it is that you're going to do throughout your answer. In paragraph 1, it's going to be one side of the argument. This is going to have 2 to 3 points with evidence and development. Somewhere in that paragraph, you're also going to want to include levels of evaluation. You're going to want to do that at the end of paragraph 1. If you can say this is a strong argument because, or this is a weak argument because, you're already starting to evaluate. And that's going to help boost you into that tier 4 of marking. Paragraph 2 then, you're going to offer an alternative view. That is not saying the first view is wrong, it is just giving an alternative view. You are weighing up 2 different possibilities and saying which one is better. In that paragraph, again, you can do 2 to 3 points. There's no specific number. You don't have to do a balanced argument in a 12-mark question. So you can have 2 points on one side, 3 points on the other. And actually, that could be one way that you do some level of evaluation. A weaker argument is going to be harder to argue, so therefore there's going to be less points in it. So I would actually recommend that in your weaker paragraph, whichever one that is, whether it's paragraph 1 or paragraph 2, you include less points than you did in your stronger paragraph. At the end then, you're going to want to have a conclusion. If you do not include a conclusion, you are capped at 9 marks. You cannot get higher than 9 marks if you do not come to some sort of conclusion, even if it is just a couple of sentences long. Some useful tips for the 12 markers then is to have a some, other, overall setup. Some people will believe this, other people will believe this. Overall, this is the best idea. If you follow that very simple structure, you're not going to go wrong. It's also really easy for the examiner to follow. If you jump around from some other, overall, and you do that sort of style, it means the examiner has to spend more time reading your answer, which, when you consider that on average an examiner will mark up to 400 papers, which means that for all 8 questions, because they don't do the multiple choice questions, for all 8 questions they're going to have to do up to 400 times. That means there's going to be 2 loads of 12 markers at 400 times each, meaning 800 12-mark questions. It gets to a point where, when they are reading it, if they're having to jump around too much, they struggle to find the marks. if you follow a really clear pattern, it's really easy for them to give you those marks. Make sure that you always reference the religion that you're talking about. Make sure that you are saying Christians believe, Muslims believe, Jews believe, Buddhists believe, Hindus believe, Sikhs believe, but also referencing where your evidence has come from. Now, this isn't as crucial in the 12 markers. If you were to embed a quotation into your sentence as you were writing, that can still give you your evidence marks. However, you don't want to do that all the time. Making sure that you have references to the religious texts or the person who said that quotation is crucial to maximize your marks. Making sure then that you are using religious teachings throughout. You do not need religious teachings for every single point, but making sure that you have at least one quotation or at least one story per paragraph. That won't get you full marks, but it's going to get you more than 9 marks. If you have 2 or 3 quotations per side of the argument, say let's have 1 for every point, that's going to guarantee you those 12 out of 12 marks. If you can't think of them, remember though, you can still get high levels of marks. If you drop a few, that's okay. It does not need to be a balanced argument. As I said earlier, you can have 2 points on one side, 3 points on the other, and still get full marks. You don't have to have an even argument. And actually, I would recommend having a weaker side be a smaller side, because obviously, as I said, a weaker side is going to have less arguments for it. Making sure that you evaluate, it is the most important thing. I know I keep saying it, but evaluate is crucial. If you do not evaluate at the end of each paragraph and have a conclusion, you're going to really struggle getting full marks. Also, it is crucial that you actually get to a conclusion. Don't just sit on the fence, because if you sit on the fence, it shows that you haven't really looked all that deep into which side is actually stronger, which is what your evaluation requires you to do. Make sure that you choose one side of the argument to be stronger. It's just, again, making your life so much easier, and as well as the examiner's lives easier, when it comes to giving you the full amount of marks that you deserve. Final advice then for this session: practice. You are able to download practice papers from the AQA website. For any religion that you're doing, you can also do this for the themes paper, which is going to come up in a following video. Make sure that you do some constant recall. Little and often, especially when it comes for keywords and quotations, is going to help you remember them much better than if you were to just try and cram them all the night before. Cramming the night before does not work. It just means that every information falls out of your head the day of the exam. Little and often, 20 minutes at a time, no more than that, because otherwise it just gets a little bit too much. Your brain can't retain all that information. Small amounts, constantly, it's going to help you. One thing that I did during my GCSEs is that I wrote everything down on sticky notes and I put them on the doors or on the TV remote. And I wouldn't be able to use the thing that the sticky note is on until I have either given the definition or answered the question. That could be one way that you do little and often recall. You can also look at the mark schemes. So like you looked at AO1 and AO2, you can also find the mark schemes for old past papers that can tell you exactly how the exam board went about marking those questions. What points were they allowing? It can just help you understand where the connections lie between different topics, because sometimes those connections do need to be made sort of by yourself. You need to be able to you need to be able to get to those points. Thank you very much, guys. I hope this has been useful. I hope this has boosted your confidence for that beliefs and practices. Good luck to those of you who are doing exams or watching this video. If you aren't quite there yet, I hope this has given you confidence that you can go into your GCSEs knowing exactly what it is that you need to be able to do. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next one.